Sometimes life hits hardest when it's quiet, no explosions, no noise, just the sound of something breaking inside you. For Jason, that moment came on a chilly afternoon, walking home from a meeting he didn't want to attend, when he saw a little boy sitting alone on the curb, holding a cardboard sign that simply said "For sale." At first he thought it was a joke, maybe a kid playing pretend, maybe a school project. But then he saw what the boy was holding in his other hand, a small, beat-up scooter with one handle wrapped in tape, and a look in his eyes no child should ever have. "Buy my scooter, sir," the boy said quietly. "My mom got evicted." And just like that, Jason's whole world stopped. He didn't know it yet, but that one encounter, that one plea from a child on a sidewalk, would uncover something far darker than he imagined. Because when he went digging into what really happened to that boy's family, he found a truth no one wanted exposed. Before we continue, I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for being here with us again. Your support, the likes, the comments, the shares, it means more than you know. Every story we tell is about reminding the world that kindness still matters, that humanity still exists, and that hope can come from the most unexpected places. So if you believe in that too, take a second to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's keep spreading these messages together. Now let's get back to the story. The street was quiet that afternoon. A thin wind moved through the rows of old brick apartments, carrying with it the faint sound of traffic and the smell of rain-soaked concrete. It wasn't the kind of street that made headlines, just another forgotten corner of the city, where people worked hard, lived quietly, and tried to get by. Jasonstatham wasn't supposed to be there. He just finished a long meeting downtown, one of those stiff, gray-suit affairs that made him question why he ever agreed to handle corporate consulting gigs between films. His driver had dropped him 2 blocks too early, so he decided to walk, hands in his pockets, jacket collar up against the wind. He wanted to clear his head before heading home. That's when he saw the boy. He couldn't have been older than 7. Thin, pale, with messy brown hair and clothes that looked one size too small. He was sitting on the curb beside a small blue scooter. In his hands, he held a piece of cardboard with shaky black letters written in marker. "For sale." Jason slowed down. At first, he thought it might have been one of those neighborhood kid things, lemonade stand, bake sale, something innocent. But there was no smile, no sign of play, just a quiet stillness around the boy that didn't belong to children his age. Jason crouched down beside him. "Hey mate," he said softly, the London accent warm but cautious. "What are you doing out here?" The boy looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, not recently, anyway, but from exhaustion. "I'm selling my scooter," he said, "so my mum can have money for rent." Jason's hand froze halfway between his knee and the pavement. He blinked, unsure he'd heard that right. "Your mum's rent." The boy nodded slowly, gripping the cardboard tighter. "She said the man came this morning. He put a paper on the door, said we have to leave." He looked down at his scooter. "I don't need it anymore. We won't have anywhere to ride." Jason's stomach sank. He'd seen hardship before more than most. Growing up, his family didn't have much. He remembered the nights his mum worked 2 jobs and still came home smiling, pretending the electricity going out was just an early bedtime. But something about hearing it from this kid, matter-of-fact, hopeless, like it was already decided, hit him in a place he hadn't visited in years. "What's your name, kid?" Jason asked. "Eli," the boy said quietly. "Eli Moore." Jason nodded. "All right, Eli, how much for the scooter?" The boy looked confused. "You want to buy it?" Jason smiled faintly. "I think it's got some miles left in it." Eli hesitated. $20. Jason reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He counted out a few bills, not just 20, but 100, and held them out. Eli's eyes widened. "That's too much." "Tell you what," Jason said, crouching lower, meeting his gaze. "Consider it a trade. I get the scooter and you promise to keep being brave. Deal." Eli bit his lip. He wanted to refuse, Jason could see that, but hunger and fear outweighed pride. Slowly, the boy nodded. "Deal." Jason handed him the money, but instead of taking the scooter, he gently pushed it back toward him. "You hang on to that for me, yeah? I've got a feeling I'll want to see it again." Eli frowned, confused. But you said. I said I was buying it, Jason interrupted with a small grin. Didn't say I was taking it away. For a moment the boy almost smiled, then his eyes dropped again. Mum's gonna be mad. She told me not to talk to people, said everyone's busy. Jason's smile faded. Where is she now? Eli pointed down the block to a narrow apartment building with peeling paint and a for rent sign already hammered into the front lawn. Up there, we're packing. Jason followed the direction of his finger. The building looked old, the kind of place where tenants fixed their own leaks and the landlord showed up only to collect cash. Something inside him twisted. He'd dealt with landlords before, people who saw property, not people. But there was something about seeing the aftermath through a child's eyes that made it feel personal. He looked back at Eli. Mind if I come say hi to your mum? The boy hesitated. She doesn't like surprises. Jason nodded slowly. Neither do I. The apartment door was cracked open when they got there. Inside, a woman knelt by a cardboard box, folding clothes with robotic precision. Her hair was tied up, her shoulders tense, her face pale with fatigue. She looked up sharply when Jason stepped in behind Eli. Eli, I told you, she froze, eyes narrowing at Jason. Who are you? Jason raised a hand gently. Easy, love, name's Jason. Your boy was outside trying to sell his scooter. I just wanted to make sure you two are all right. Her expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. You bought it. He nodded, tried to, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. She let out a weary sigh, rubbing her temples. I'm sorry, he shouldn't have done that, we're fine, really. Jason looked around the small apartment. The furniture was old but clean. The cupboards were mostly empty. You sure about that? She straightened up. Look, I appreciate the concern, but we're handling it. It's just been a rough few weeks. Eviction notice? He asked quietly. She froze again. How did you? Eli told me. Her shoulders slumped. She turned away, voice trembling. They raised the rent twice in 6 months. I fell behind after I got sick. I tried to catch up, but they don't care. The new owner said he's restructuring the building. She gave a bitter laugh. That's what they call it when they throw people out. Jason frowned. New owner. She nodded. Some company, Landway Holdings or something. I've never met the man in charge, only the collector. Jason's eyes darkened at the name. Landway. He'd heard it before, one of those faceless corporations that bought old buildings cheap, evicted tenants, and resold at triple the price. He'd crossed paths with their lawyers on a film set once, during a property dispute. Greedy, smug, untouchable. Do you have anywhere to go? He asked. Not yet, she admitted. I'm trying to find something nearby, but with the deposit, first month's rent, everything's gone. They gave us until Friday. Jason glanced around the room again. He could see the quiet desperation everywhere, boxes half-packed, unpaid bills stacked on the counter, the faint smell of mildew that came from years of living with leaks no one fixed. He exhaled slowly. What's your name? Myra, she said softly. Myra Moore. Jason nodded. All right, Myra, let me make a few calls, see what I can do. She frowned. Why would you do that? He gave her a small, weary smile. Because I've been where you are. And because your kid's got more heart than most people I know. That night Jason sat in his kitchen with a mug of tea, laptop open, and frustration building with every click. Landway Holdings wasn't just some small-time landlord. It was a network, dozens of shell companies, each owning a piece of the city. Every name he searched led to another front, another offshore account, another dead end. But then something caught his eye. An old business registry listing. The managing director, Arthur Vance. Jason's brow furrowed. The name sounded familiar. He leaned back, thinking. Then it hit him. Vance was the man who'd bragged at a charity gala last year about streamlining low-income housing. The kind of man who smiled while ruining lives, then toasted to urban development. Jason stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. He'd played villains before, ruthless CEOs, mercenaries, crooked cops, but he'd always walked away knowing it was fiction. This was real. And that made it worse. The next morning, Jason showed up at the Landway offices. No cameras, no entourage, just him, wearing a dark jacket and the kind of look that made receptionists sit up straight. "Can I help you, sir?" the young woman at the desk asked. "Yeah," Jason said, sliding a folded paper across the counter. "This eviction notice went to a tenant named Myra Moore. I'd like to speak to whoever signed it." She blinked. "I'm sorry, that information's private." Jason leaned in slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Then make it public." There was something about his tone, low, deliberate, carrying that unmistakable edge that made her instinctively reach for the phone. Moments later, a tall man in a tailored suit appeared, all charm and false smiles. "Mr. Statham," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you here. I'm Arthur Vance." Jason didn't take the hand. "Let's talk." Vance led him into a glass-walled office that overlooked the city. The place screamed money, leather chairs, whiskey decanter, framed contracts on the wall. "Now," Vance said, sitting back, "what seems to be the problem?" Jason placed the eviction notice on the desk. "This, a woman and her son, kicked out with 3 days' notice." Vance smiled faintly. "Ah, yes, the Moors, unfortunate situation, but we have procedures." "Procedures?" Jason interrupted, his voice tightening. "You mean making people homeless so you can paint the walls and triple the rent?" Vance's smile faltered. "Now, let's not be dramatic." "Dramatic?" Jason repeated, leaning forward. "You ever looked a kid in the eye while he's selling his only toy just to feed his mum? No. Then maybe you're not qualified to talk about what's dramatic." Vance's jaw clenched. "Mr. Statham, I don't appreciate being lectured in my own office." Jason stood slowly, his shadow falling across the desk. "Then maybe you should stop giving people reasons to." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "You've got 48 hours. Either you fix this or I'll make sure your name's on every front page in the country." That night Jason sat in his car outside the apartment complex. The lights were off in most of the windows, except for one, Myra's. He could see her silhouette moving back and forth, still packing. Eli sat on the floor, the scooter beside him, cardboard sign leaning against the wall. Jason clenched his jaw. He wasn't done, not yet. Something about this felt bigger than one eviction, bigger than one family. And deep down, he knew, whatever he was about to uncover next was going to change everything. Jason barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eli sitting on that curb, small hands clutching a cardboard sign, trying to be brave while the world forgot about him. He had no script for this, no cameras, no director yelling cut. This was real life, and in real life heroes didn't wear capes, they just did something. By sunrise, Jason was already on his phone, digging deeper into Landway holdings. He wasn't the kind of man to take no for an answer, and years of navigating movie contracts had taught him how to read between the lines, especially when someone was hiding something. And sure enough, Vance was hiding a lot. He found it buried in an old legal filing, one most people would have overlooked, a development permit that wasn't supposed to exist yet. Landway had been buying up properties all across the city, quietly forcing tenants out, filing fake safety violations, then flipping the land to a luxury developer under a separate shell company. On paper, it looked clean. In reality, it was a calculated scam. And the building where Myra and Eli lived, it was right in the middle of that plan. Jason leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. They weren't just throwing families out, they were targeting them. Low-income tenants, single parents, anyone who couldn't afford to fight back. He exhaled through his nose. "All right, Vance," he muttered, "let's see how you like being exposed." Later that morning, Jason showed up at the apartment building again. Myra was outside with Eli, standing by a pile of boxes stacked near the sidewalk. A moving truck hadn't arrived because there wasn't one coming. When she saw him, she looked both surprised and wary. "You again," she said. "Jason, I told you, you've already done enough." Jason glanced at the boxes. "Doesn't look like it." She gave a dry laugh. "They shut off the power this morning, said it's part of the transition process." Jason's expression hardened. "Transition, he stopped himself. "You packed everything." "Mostly, we're going to stay with my sister for a while," she said, though her voice betrayed doubt. "She lives 2 cities over. It's not permanent." Jason crouched down beside Eli. "Hey champ, you holding up all right?" The boy nodded weakly. "Mum says it's just for a little while." Jason smiled faintly. "You've got a good mum." Eli looked up. "She's sad." Jason's chest tightened. He glanced at Myra, who quickly looked away, blinking back tears. She was trying to stay strong for her son, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending it was just a small setback. Jason had seen that look before. The quiet, exhausted defiance of someone who's been fighting too long and can't afford to stop. "Listen," he said after a moment, "I might have found something. That company, Landway Holdings, they've been breaking laws to get people like you out. I'm working on getting proof." Myra frowned. "Jason, you can't just fight corporations. They have lawyers, they have money." He smirked. "Yeah, but I've got both too." She stared at him, unsure if he was joking, but his tone was dead serious. By noon, Jason was in a small newsroom downtown, one that had helped him years ago during a charity case involving a hospital. He still knew one of the editors there, a woman named Laura Bennett, sharp, fearless, and allergic to injustice. When she saw him walk in, her eyebrows shot up. "Jasonstatham," she said, half smiling, "tell me you're not here to pitch a movie." "Not this time," he said, sliding a folder onto her desk. She opened it, scanning through the pages, printouts, photos, property filings, all carefully organized. "What am I looking at?" "Landway Holdings," Jason said. "They're buying up old buildings, forcing tenants out, then flipping them to developers through ghost companies. They've been at it for years. I want to make it stop." Laura whistled softly. "You've been busy. Can you run it?" "If I can verify it, yes, but I'll need sources, names, evidence." Jason nodded. "You'll have them." That night, Jason went back to Myra's building. The eviction date was the next morning. The halls were eerily quiet. Most of the tenants had already left. The ones who remained looked defeated, avoiding eye contact as they carried boxes to cars that weren't theirs. He knocked on Myra's door. She opened it slowly, surprised to see him again. "Jason, what are you doing here?" He smiled faintly. "Making sure you're not alone." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was almost empty now. A few boxes, a couple of blankets, and Eli asleep on the couch, clutching that same scooter. Jason looked around quietly. "You shouldn't have to go through this." She sighed. "It's life, people like us. We just learn to start over." Jason leaned against the wall. "You shouldn't have to start over because someone wants to make more money." She looked at him for a moment, searching his face. "Why are you doing this, Jason? You don't even know us." He thought about that, about all the roles he'd played, heroes, anti-heroes, men who fought against impossible odds, and how this was the first time it actually meant something. "Because," he said finally, "if I walk away, then I'm no better than the people who did this." The next morning, Jason was already at Landway's office when Arthur Vance arrived. He was leaning against the reception desk, calm, unbothered, holding a coffee cup like he owned the place. Vance froze mid-step. "What are you doing here?" Jason smiled slightly. "Morning, Arthur, you've been busy." Vance frowned. "I don't have time for." Jason held up a folder and tossed it onto the front desk. "You might want to make time. That's a copy of everything I gave the press. Every document, every fake inspection report, every forged signature." Vance's expression cracked. "You wouldn't dare." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think because you hide behind legal jargon and offshore accounts you're untouchable. Let me tell you something. You can bully people. You can take their homes. But the moment you make a kid sell his toy on the street, you've crossed a line." Vance's face reddened. "You're making a mistake." Jason tilted his head. "Maybe, but it's one I can live with." 2 days later, the story exploded online. Hollywood actor exposes massive eviction scam. Landway Holdings under investigation for fraud. Hundreds of families to be compensated after illegal evictions. News crews surrounded Landway's headquarters. Protesters gathered outside. And for once, the cameras weren't on Jason for a film premiere. They were on him because he refused to stay silent. When the story broke, Myra called him in tears. "They stopped the eviction," she said. "They're letting us stay. The city's investigating everything." Jason smiled on the other end of the line. "Good. About time someone fought back. She hesitated. Jason, I don't know how to thank you. You already did, he said softly. You raised a kid who didn't give up. A week later, Jason visited again. The boxes were gone, replaced by laughter and light. Eli was riding his scooter in the hallway, grinning ear to ear. When he saw Jason, he ran up immediately. You came back. Told you I would, Jason said, ruffling his hair. How's the scooter holding up? Great, Mum says we can stay here now. Jason smiled. That's the best news I've heard all week. Myra appeared at the doorway, smiling faintly. You really did it, didn't you? Jason shrugged modestly. Just gave a few people a reason to do the right thing. She walked closer. You know, before all this, I used to think people like you didn't exist, that everyone just looked the other way. Jason met her gaze, voice low. Most do, until they meet someone who reminds them why they shouldn't. Myra blinked away tears. Thank you for everything. He smiled gently. Take care of that boy, he's got a big heart. She nodded. He gets it from people like you. That night Jason took one last walk through the neighborhood. The air was cool, quiet. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement. He stopped at the corner where he'd first seen Eli, the same spot where the boy had sat, clutching that sign that said for sale. It was gone now. All that was left was a faint chalk mark on the sidewalk, a reminder of what used to be there. Jason smiled faintly, then turned to leave. But just before he did, a voice called out behind him. Sir? It was Eli running toward him, waving something in his hand. It was the cardboard sign. I kept it, the boy said proudly. Mum said it's part of our story now. Jason took it, smiled, and looked at the faded letters. You know what, Eli, you're right. He handed it back carefully. But next time, kid, let's make sure what you're selling is happiness, yeah. Eli laughed, nodding. Okay. Jason watched him run back toward the apartment, his laughter echoing down the street. And for the first time in a long while, Jason felt something that didn't come from fame or fortune. It came from knowing he'd made a difference. Because sometimes, it's not about saving the world. It's about saving one person's world. And that can change everything.